It may be summer now, but the secret to enjoying homegrown veg next year is to start sowing them now. Imagine harvesting fresh broccoli in the chilly days of next March. Sounds amazing, right? But it won't happen by accident. It will have happened because you have planned it. So let's grab our seed trays and sow for the future. So why sow now? Well, brassicas, which is what we're going to be looking at today, the ones that you want to harvest next year, they're going to have to be in the ground for anything from 4 to 8 months, depending on which variety you are growing and when you want them to harvest. Once you transplant them out into your plots, they'll use the summer warmth to get their roots down and become well established, and then they'll overwinter and give up their harvest during the hungry gap next year. Now, the hungry gap basically is a period between March, late March and late May, when there's very little for you to be able to harvest from your plots. These vegetables, as you saw earlier this year, myself, Mrs. W, we were harvesting fresh brassicas out of our plots all the way up until the end of May. And now, with the plantings we have now, these are now taking over. So essentially, we've beaten the hungry gap. By making these sowings now, what you're actually doing is a form of succession planting. Succession plantings can come in many different guises. Every time you re-sow salad onions or radishes or lettuce, that's a succession sowing. These sowings we're going to make now, what you need to do is to identify what's actually going to be harvesting in your plots over the next 4 to 6 weeks. That's going to give these sowings time to get 2 to 3 true leaves on them so that they're strong enough to go out into the plots. You need to be thinking along the lines of onions. This is one of our onion beds. These will actually harvest sometime in July. And so in 4 to 6 weeks' time, I can actually put some of these new sowings into here. Think broad beans. Ours have overwintered. So they're going to be finished very, very soon. In fact, I won't be surprised if we actually harvest everything off those plants this weekend that I'm filming on, which is, we're just coming to the end of the first week in June. That's a full 2 weeks earlier for myself and Mrs. W. That's because the weather has been so fine. Actually, we've had some very welcome rain in the early hours of this morning. Where our red onions and shallots are, they too will be harvested toward the end of July. We have a brassica bed, which we're now going to start harvesting from, which has our greens for June. And then in the very next row, there's our greens for the month of July. So again, by the end of July, that bed becomes free. It could be your early potatoes are becoming ready for harvest, and as you clear those, you can then drop these plants in. And if it is to be your new potatoes, you won't want to dig them all up in one go, and I don't blame you for that. I like to enjoy my fresh new potatoes, freshly dug from the ground. It's the best way to enjoy them. But even if that's the case, and that plot is not going to become available until maybe even the beginning of August, still make these sowings now. Remember, these vegetables are going to be in your plots for 4, 6, maybe even 8 months. Remember that Oreo cabbage that I harvested? That was harvested right toward the end of May. And I sowed them at this time of the year. It was the best part of 10 months it's taken to come to harvest. If it's the case that you can't get them in sometime in July, as they grow bigger, just pop them on up to the next size pot, just to keep them going. The advantage of this is that, well, first and foremost, you'll always have plants to go in your plots as and when space becomes available. But they will have already done 4, 6 or 8 weeks of their growing. You're borrowing time, cheating the system if you like. That's a good feeling, isn't it? And if you're struggling for space to keep your plants growing until a bed becomes free, you can always actually interplant. See these onions, they've got a fair distance between them. And as they grow, you could put one in here, because the plants that you're going to be transplanting will be quite tiny. And it will not affect these one little bit, because all you're going to do is to twist the onions out. I often see comments that tell me that I'm giving my plots a rest this year. Well, let me tell you, that's an absolute myth. Soil does not need a rest. Soil is busy all of the time. This plot here is going to be receiving some plants later this week. It's actually been empty since we harvested, I think it was some cabbages and cauliflower from here, wasn't it, Mrs. W?
Yes, yeah, it was, yeah.
So it's probably been empty for 4 weeks or so. Even though we're no dig, even though it's had its annual mulch of compost, it's growing weeds. Not many, I grant you. Nothing's taken over, but it's growing weeds. So don't assume that your soil is not going to continue working and growing if you don't plant in it. It will. It'll just grow weeds. So we might as well use that, keep it productive, and grow vegetables. If we continue to keep planting, what it does, and especially with these, but you can see the size of these cabbages, the big leaves, they're like elephant's ears. They keep the weeds down because they're excluding light. They're also keeping the soil warm. In the case of the ones that will be here over winter, they're trapping heat down towards the soil. You often find when you come out on a frosty day that the leaves will be white. But actually, if you feel down towards the bottom of the plant and around the stem, it's hardly frozen at all. So don't assume that you're actually giving your soil a rest by not growing. It's going to continue to grow. No-dig gardening gives you a great advantage when it comes to succession planting. Because all we need to do is to twist out the vegetable that's just given us our harvest. And then I just roughly, and I mean roughly, make sure the surface is quite level, dip my holes, and in go the next plantings. There's no need to dig, no need to try and make the soil better again. The soil is healthy. Healthy soil means healthy plants. That leads to bigger harvests. We should begin our sowing with the purple sprouting broccoli. Purple sprouting broccoli, it is the saviour of all plants. It gives such amazing harvests during late winter, all the way up to the month of April. Now I'm going to be sowing a variety called Rudolph. We've actually grown that for a number of years now, and I won't ever stop growing it. Reason being, from the sowing now, you could be harvesting this from mid-December. For us, sometimes it's mid-December, sometimes it's toward the end of December. But you begin to get those lovely spears. The next variety I'm actually going to sow is one that we tried for the very first time last year, which is called early sprouting broccoli. That gives its harvest during February and March, late February in our case, and all the way through March. And the two will overlap. Rudolph will actually still be giving us some harvests into February, and then early purple sprouting broccoli then kicks in. And then lastly, I'm going to sow claret. Claret really is an amazing variety. The amount of food that you get from just 2 plants is phenomenal. Unlike the other two, claret is an F1 variety, so it's been bred specifically to give an abundance of harvest. However, I don't just want to be eating purple sprouting broccoli. You can have too much of a good thing, and I do like a mix of vegetables to be able to eat at any time of the year so that I don't have to keep eating the same thing. So alongside that, I also want some cabbages. Now, cabbages are great to have in your plots at this time of the year. It'll be winter, it's cold out there. Mother Nature has provided a lovely fridge for you outside. And that is the key reason why when you grow cabbages in the winter, they can hold in the ground for much, much longer. They're hardly growing. They're just sitting there waiting for you to come along and pick them. The first one I'm going to be sowing is varieties. Now that should give its harvest during January and February. But actually, if I still had one in the ground in a month's time, it'll still be sitting there happily and I will be able to harvest it. The next variety that I want to sow is a variety called Wintessa. This will give harvest between March and April. Crucial months when we're looking at something to eat. Prime hungry gap time. And then the last cabbage we're going to be sowing is Tundra. Tundra, if it's sown now, will begin its harvest during December. And again, it's a very hardy variety, so like all the others, even if I don't want those in December, they'll still be there some 4 to 6 weeks later, and I can just harvest them as and when I want. Incidentally, if the weather was going to be harsh, if you live in a part of the world where maybe it snows a lot, you can harvest these and they'll actually store quite well in a garage. If you've got beams that run across, then just hang them up over the beams. They will actually last a long time in there. If you go to it and you find that some of the leaves actually have, gone a bit mouldy, just peel off those outer leaves. And I can assure you it will reveal a lovely, tasty cabbage underneath. I want to put cauliflowers in the row as well. Aylesmere is the one for April. A sowing made now, and we'll be harvesting those next April. And then Oreo. I took a chance on this last year. It was the first time I'd ever grown it. And boy, were they great cauliflowers. They were like that. And they gave us lots of food to be able to eat. Lastly, it's time for us to sow our kale. Kale is right up there at the very top with purple sprouting broccoli. It is an amazing vegetable. It can give you harvest. Well, this will begin its harvest for us probably towards the end of August. It will be ready for us to start picking the young leaves, and it will continue to give us harvest all the way through the rest of the year, and then into the following year. It'll take a little break where it won't produce quite so much during the coldest months of December and January, but by February it will once again be throwing out those lovely lush young leaves. The two varieties I'm going to be sowing are Curly Dwarf and Cavallo Nero. Both perform really well, and like I say, they'll be giving you food once they begin harvest for over 6 months of their lives. Amazing as that. Now, as usual, I shall be sowing these into my module trays. I've already filled them, dibbed the holes, 2 seeds per cell. And if 2 germinate, just thin to the strongest seedling. And in 4 to 6 weeks' time, we'll be putting those out into our plots. So that's those sown. Just cover them over with some vermiculite. And I've just pulled this table down temporarily just to do the sowing, so they won't stay in here, because now we have our Vivor mini greenhouse. They can go down to there to germinate. Now, what I would say is that at this time of the year, we're seeing, or you will see, we've been seeing for the last few weeks, but the cabbage white butterflies. So once they germinate, don't leave them anywhere where they can get to them. So if you're leaving them in a greenhouse or a polytunnel with the doors open, those butterflies can still get in. Once they've actually germinated, what I shall do is I shall pop them into our cold frame. And with our cold frame, Mrs. W has put some EnviroMesh over the front so that the air can circulate and they can get the light that they need, but nothing else can get through to lay their eggs. And we learned from bitter experience. We went away on holiday one year, leaving some of these where they were vulnerable to those butterflies. And actually, when I went to transplant them into the ground, they looked perfectly fine to me. Never thought any more of it. And all of a sudden we thought, whatever's happening to all these plants? Of course, the caterpillars had come out and they were starting to devour them. So at this time of the year, protect any brassica seedlings so that those butterflies cannot land on them. And then we just pop those into the water bath. And we'll come back to those in about half an hour. Now, I had a question from Laura and Ian, and they were saying about their parsnips. Now, I know you sent me a picture, and I've got to say, I think your parsnips are absolutely fine. You can see what ours are like here. I promised you I'd take some footage so that you can see. Yes, ours might be a little larger than yours, but I don't know when you actually sowed yours into your plots. We sowed ours right at the very end of March. So it's been in there a little while. If you did sow yours at the same time and they maybe look smaller than ours, I wouldn't worry about it too much. They look absolutely fine to me. There could be many reasons why that's happened. It could be that germination took a long time. Parsnips are renowned for taking a long time to germinate. I can remember once actually sowing some in April, and by the time we got to now, June, myself and Mrs. W were thinking, where are the parsnips? You know, your own weather conditions can dictate to some extent how that happens. When I sow my parsnips, I like to make sure the drill is watered thoroughly at the time of putting those seeds into the drill, just so that they've got a lot of moisture there to be able to germinate. But yeah, I think they look absolutely fine. Thinking ahead to next March, when everybody else is panicking, I've got nothing in my plots. Myself and Mrs. W, we shall be coming out here and picking our dinner. This is the power of planning. By thinking ahead, you're planning your harvest, and you will have harvest for next year. And you're no longer just growing vegetables, you're growing self-sufficiency. If you enjoyed this video, do give us a like, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Maybe consider sharing it with another fellow gardener that maybe is interested in succession planting. Cabbages, of course, are one of the vegetables that will feature in the autumn and winter garden. And if you want to get a bit more of a heads up and see how you can grow these amazing vegetables from seed to table, then watch this video next. And remember, healthy soil equals healthy plants that give you bigger harvests. No spade required. We shall see you on the next one.